Om Ganati Manandasya Ganaganasaka Chaksurun Minitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Yena Bodhare Sayam Rupakaramayam Dadati Swaparantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Sya Sri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishikan Vitam Sya Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Cheva Narotamam Devam Satyam Vyasam Tato Jayodhira Nishta Prayashu Bhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagavatir Tamashoki Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Nigamalka Paturu Garitam Palam Shukamakaramitta Dravi Samidham Pibata Bhagavatam Arshamalayam Mahoda Hori Sikabhuhi Bhavgaham Krishna Swaduma Pagate Dhamikamanhi Shaha Karonasta Dushamisha Paranako Dunoditam Tramapiyad Abhishuta Vishwatam Vibhosam Apiyadana Vinamra Kisanam Prakahitu Hoamaranam Sanklesha Nirvana Visanti Tanyatam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pasaya Bhutare Srimati Bhakti Padanta Shami Tanam Namaste Sarasati Deva Guravani Pachadine Nirvishesa Sunyavadi Paskata Desana Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaur Bhakta Bindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Welcome to Wisdom Wednesday, Govinda, Dave, Yudha, Joe, Thomas. I don't know whether you're upstairs or still in Idaho or en route, but welcome to our Wednesday night forum. This is Caru coming to you from Spanish Fort, Utah with the bee-stung lip look. Anjali commented on yesterday. She mentioned that ladies pay thousands and thousands of dollars to get that swollen bee-stung look. I seem to have got it for free. I looked it up. It seems to have come from an allergy, whether it's a particular mask that I wore or whether it was a type of lip balm I was using. Anyway, I'm experimenting with various things, and I've got an appointment with the dermatologist next Tuesday to see if it hasn't gone away by then. It's less painful by now, I'm sure you'll all be glad to know. But in the meantime, you guys will just have to put up with that drop-dead gorgeous Bridget Bardot, Marilyn Monroe bee-stung look on my face. Let's go now. We're moved one verse forward. We're on the 29th verse, 3rd chapter, 1st canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Janma Goyam Bhagavato Ya Etat Prayato Nara Shayam Prato Grinam Bhaktya Dukad Brahmyad Vimuchate. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Whoever carefully recites the mysterious appearances of the Lord with devotion in the morning, as you all are doing right now, and in the evening, gets relief from all miseries of life. Anarto pasamam shaksha. In the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada's purport reads, the personality of Godhead has declared that anyone who knows the principles of the transcendental birth and activities of the Lord will go back to Godhead after being relieved from this material tabernacle. So simply knowing facts of the mysterious way of the Lord's incarnations in this material world can liberate one from material bondage. And this is the verse that Prabhupada refers to in the 4th chapter, 9th verse of the Bhagavad Gita. Janma karma me divyam. Janma means birth, karma means activity. So Krishna says, my birth and activities are divyam, they're transcendental. Evam yo veti chakpadaha. Someone who understands these in truth. That means you have to understand the beloved from the lover. You can't read about Krishna's birth and activities from a mundaner, from an academic, from someone who's looking from the outside in. Prabhupada gives the example, you can't know the taste of honey by licking the jar. You can't understand in truth the transcendental nature of Krishna's birth and activities by reading about it or hearing about it from a non-devotee. In fact, it'll have just the opposite effect. You'll interpret everything in a mundane way. Vaishnava makodganam putam harikadam shravanam sarpo chishtam. Sarpo means snake. It says milk is very good. However, when milk has been touched by the lips of a snake, it has poisonous effects. So one should not just hear about Krishna from Google or Wikipedia or from Christopher Isherwood or Dr. Radhakrishna or even from Gandhi. I want you to hear from those who are certified, pure devotees of the Lord coming into disciplic succession. And then one can understand how it is that Krishna's activities and birth are not mundane, not ordinary, but they are in fact divyam. And what will be the result if you take the trouble to hear about Krishna from the right source? Chatva deham purnar janma. I don't think anybody's going to argue that we took these bodies, right? We are at present embodied. Prabhupada uses the word tabernacle. We're in this tabernacle of flesh and bones and hair and blood and stool and swollen lips, teeth, eyebrows. And it's not a compatible situation. You know, we aspire for freedom, total and unconditional, unrestricted freedom. You can't really aspire for someone unless on some level you have it, or you have had it in the past. You can't imagine anything of which you have no experience. Of course, you can imagine gold in a mountain and imagine a gold mountain. But you experience gold and you experience the mountain, and then what you imagine is just a composite. So our hankerings, our longings for immortality spring from the immortal soul which resides within our breasts. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "The greatest evidence and argument in favor of the immortality of the soul," listen very carefully, this is deep. "The greatest evidence and argument in favor of the immortality of the soul," Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "is our dissatisfaction with anything less." And how true that is. How frustrated we are by being conditioned by birth, death, disease, and old age, swollen lips, and viruses, and pandemics, and dishonest politicians. We have immortal longings, which I believe was the title of a Back to Godhead article not too long ago, which is very, very inspiring. So what is a further scriptural evidence that just taking the trouble to hear from a bona fide spiritual master, the nectar, the immortal nectar, the food for the soul, that which will revive us and restore our dormant, latent Krishna consciousness. Krishna says in the 9th chapter, 25th verse of the Bhagavad Gita, Yanti Deva Bratavaran, if you worship the demigod Shiva, Brahma, you can go at the time of leaving this present body to the planets of the demigods. They live in heaven. But when we as Krishna devotees say heaven, we don't mean the same thing as others. Our definition of heaven is a higher place in the material world. The inhabitants of the heavenly planets, the moon is one of them, the sun is one of them, are enjoying the results of pious activities which were performed here on earth. And as a result, in their next life, they get to live hundreds of thousands of years. They have immense responsibility and power over the Department of the Universal Affairs, and they have a much higher standard of living. However, they are also mortal. Even Brahma, the creator of the universe, also dies after 311 trillion years. So going to heaven is not the same thing in our lexicon as going to the kingdom of God. Our word for the kingdom of God is Vaikuntha. So Krishna starts off this verse by Yanti Deva Vratadevan. If you worship very steadily, steadfastly the devas, the demigods, you can go to the planets of the demigods and enjoy the results of pious activities. However, evam bhukva shvagaloka vishanham senye parna martaloka vishanti. After the sum total of your pious activities is exhausted, you fall down, senye punya martaloka, you fall back down to this world of birth and death. It's like a Ferris wheel, coming and going, coming and going. Okay, what's the next category? Pitrin yanti pitri vrataha. Many of us feel the absence of our loved ones, our parents, our grandparents, those that loved us, those that invested in us, those that made us who we are today. We feel their departure, even it might have been a year ago, 10 years ago, 20, very sharply. It's a very sharp pain. We're so indebted to them. There's so much of them in us that we just want to be with them. The Mormon religion is a very big component of the Mormon religion, is never being separated from your family members. And that's also a longing, a hankering. And that can be satisfied by worshiping and hankering and focusing on the ancestors, the departed members of our previous generations. Pitri, and they're called Pitris. Pitri, and they're planets of the ancestors, and you can go there and you can rejoin them. Okay, the third option is not so savory for civilized human beings, but there's plenty of people in the human form walking around nowadays who are hardly civilized. Dvipada Pashu, no better than two-legged animals, addicted to intoxication, illicit sex, gambling, meat eating, expert in insulting others, destroying what others have built up. So those are people who are in the mode of tamagun, or ignorance. And generally they worship, or at least appreciate, ghosts and spirits. They're in a state of madness, so they resonate with other subtle beings who are also suffering from illusion and madness. So Bhutani Yanti Bhutajan, if you gravitate towards the ghosts and spirits, you can go to the ghosts and spirits after leaving this present body. We know people that, watch horror movies, make horror movies, dress. Their Christmas is Halloween, which is coming up pretty soon. But then there's thank God, thank Krishna, there's a fourth alternative, which is better than life on the planets of the demigods. It's better than rejoining your ancestors. And it's much, much better than going to live with ghosts and spirits. And it is Yanti Deva Vritavana. Krishna says, those who worship me, those who understand me, through the chain of succession from bona fide spiritual master, Yanti Madhigino Pima, they go to my eternal planet. Mamapeti Pranarjama Dukali Masasratam. This material world is temporary and is full of misery. But those who go to my planet, Mamapeti Dukali, they transcend, they get out, they escape, they get freedom from this temporary, miserable material world. Mamapeti Pranarjama Nabnavanti Mahatmana, the great souls, the rare souls who try for ultimate freedom, Samsiddhim Paramam Gatim, having gone to Krishna's transcendental planet, Goloka Vrindavan, they never come back again to this material world. Why? Samsiddhim Paramam Gatim, because they have achieved the very, very highest perfection. So missing us, you'd hardly imagine that God would miss us. Chintamani Pakara Sadmishu Kalpavrikshu Lakshavitusu Sarabhir. In the spiritual world, the Lord's every wish is attended to by hundreds of thousands of goddesses of fortune. They cannot leave the Lord's side even for a moment. In this material world, if you want to be incredibly opulent, a millionaire, a billionaire, you worship either directly or indirectly the goddess of fortune. And if she pleases you, you become unimaginably wealthy. House, cars, transportation, yachts, and so on and so forth. But her nature is chanchala. She doesn't stay anywhere for very long. If you look at most of the representations of Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, in Indian iconography, she's never sitting. She's mostly standing. That means she doesn't intend to settle with you. She'll visit you if you worship her intently, but she'll leave. If you have a guest that appears at your door, you invite them in, please have a seat, and they say, no, I'll stand. It means they're not going to stay for very long. It means they don't want to get comfortable or have a prolonged stay in your house. Goddess of fortune is most often standing. She may bless one generation with fabulous wealth, but it's often seen that the sons and the grandsons are debauchees, and they waste and fritter away and squander the fortune. But in the Krishna's abode, thousands and thousands of goddesses of fortune, not one or two, but thousands and thousands, attend him at every moment, and they cannot leave him even for a second. So that Supreme Personality of Godhead descended, and you hardly imagine that he would miss us, being attended by a goddess of fortunes. They're uncountable, liberated souls with their original spiritual bodies, engaged with the Lord in the spiritual world. So you'd think he'd be so engaged in so many different ways and with so many different liberated souls and with so many different flavors of intimacy, then why would he miss us? And the fact is that he is omniscient. He is aware of everything in the material and spiritual world, and he is aware of our suffering, and he empathizes with it. He doesn't feel it personally, but he empathizes with our lost loneliness in this material world. And he wants us to get back into the game. He wants us to get off the sidelines, to revive our dormant Krishna consciousness, and get back into an intimate relationship with him. He enjoys that. He is a addict of love. Krishna is all about love, all about intimacy, all about eternal friendships. We told yesterday, after burning the Kandava forest and getting the admiration of Indra, the king of the heavenly planets, Indra came down, he embraced his son Arjuna, he offered Arjuna the use of any of Indra's celestial weapons, and then he turned to Krishna, and he said, what can I do for you, Krishna? He says, ask me anything. All the resources of heaven are at my command. And if you want, I will be your footstool. I will be your shoe shine boy. And all Krishna asked was, may I attain the eternal friendship of Arjuna, that we may never be separated. So Krishna is all about love and intimacy and friendship, and he created you in order to love you and to be loved by you. But you're not with the program. All of your suffering, frustration, loneliness, alienation from yourself, from your environment, from other living beings, stems from your basic separation from God. Krishna Baliya se jiva bahira dirmaka. Our problem, the root cause of our problem, is that we've forgotten Krishna. So we try to revive that consciousness by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And if you doubt that Krishna misses you, if you doubt that Krishna hankers after having you back to the spiritual world, if you doubt that Krishna wants you back more than you want to go yourself, Krishna proved it for once and for all by coming again 500 years ago as his devotional incarnation, the golden avatar, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya wrote a verse about the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu coming all the way from the spiritual world to show us how to understand Krishna's birth and activities in truth and how to honor Krishna consequently. Vairagya, Vijja, Nija Bhakti no Shikshartam Ekaparushaparanam, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Sarira Diri Kripambudhir Yastamaham Papadye. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is asking, let me take shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, who has descended from the spiritual world in the form of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his devotional incarnation, to teach us by example real knowledge, to teach us by example how we can understand the transcendental nature of Krishna's birth and activities, the result of which is that after leaving this current body, we will not again take another material body, but ascend in our original eternal, blissful, knowledgeable spiritual bodies to the kingdom of God. Lord Chaitanya is teaching that by his appearance. It says his devotional service and detachment from whatever does not foster Krishna consciousness is a shining emblem of perfection for all of our conditioned souls suffering in this material world of birth and death. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya says, let me surrender unto his lotus feet. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's only business was chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Sometimes he appeared to just go away in his consciousness. His body was there, but Lord Chaitanya was somewhere in the ocean of love of God, totally unaware and oblivious of the body and the mind. There was a type of a madness about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that is the type of, normally we want to stay away from madness and illusion. It's in the mode of darkness. But the type of madness out of love for Krishna, the addiction that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had for chanting the holy names of the Lord, that we want to emulate. We want to be infected by that. Lord Chaitanya himself says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Amahena yeva yeha yatala haya edrishti bhagavatera artha janaya. If one becomes a madman after chanting Hare Krishna and honoring Krishna through his holy names, like me, he may also understand the meaning in truth of Krishna's birth and activities, and after ending this life, he'll go back to home, back to God. We can't obviously imitate the mood and the activities of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is God himself. That's not possible. However, we should take a page from his book and seriously follow in his footsteps by vigorously serving the Lord and chanting his holy names. Perhaps I could be persuaded right now by some emojis to launch into my own contemporary rendition of the 8 verses that Lord Chaitanya mentioned about the glories of chanting the Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hint, hint, all you there. A couple of you are starting to get the hint. Are you listening intently? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. You're getting better, but I think I'll have to have a little more than that. Okay, now we're getting it. Now we're getting it. We're getting it. Okay. I intend to give this contemporary version of the 8 verses, the Shiksha Astakam, the 8 verses which are instructional about the chanting of the holy names, and then recite the original verses as Lord Chaitanya wrote them and spoke them. Then we'll get right back into the substance of our text here. Chanting the holy names cleanses the heart, extinguishes the flames, breaks the chains, blesses the earth at large with moonlight rays, discharging waves of nectar our senses been craving since ancient days. The holy names put all their blessings to shame. Krishna Govinda, chanted anywhere, everywhere. The mercy Shakti is fully there. Divine app to restore your mental software, zap the malware, restart your heart, tap the reservoir of loving care. No hard and fast rules, no lessons, no schools. The bliss of bhakti rare, yet free for the taking, only declare your heart is aching in divine love awakening. Night and day by constant recitation, chant the great mantra without hesitation, free from temptation, with a sensation of feeling yourself lower in the snow in the street, more tolerant than the tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige. Humility is the key to enjoy the vibration eternally. Wealth in the millions, beautiful women, the spell of fame, worldly acclaim, even liberation, hey, totally lame compared to the champagne, chanting the holy names. Krishna Govinda, son of Nanda, though you're the one, second to none, my shining sun. I'm heartbroken in this ocean of birth and death. It's not worth the commotion. Pull me out of this cruel blender, surrendered as an atom in the sweet splendor of your tender lotus feet. Lord, when will my eyes pour with tears of love like rain from the skies above? When will my voice choke up invoking your name? When in transcendence will my bodily hairs stand on end? Though a moment appears like 12 years or more when you're not here, I've only proclaim your name and I'm smiling again. Even if you restrain me, roughen your embrace, or you pain me by hiding your face, you remain my Lord unconditionally, no matter what the difficulty, decline, or gain. Rain or shine, I am yours and you are mine. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Thank you for lifting me up with all the emojis through that. Now let's do the original, shall we? Really quickly here. Thank you, you guys. Great. Tomorrow I won't be with you. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to be moping around. Cheto Darpanam Arjanam Babadivagni Nirvapanam Sreya Kairavichadikaranam Vijavadu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Patinam Param Rishashvaranam Sarvatmashnapanam Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam Namnamakari Bahodani Jasarvashakti Statapitani Matishmarana Kara Tadushita Vakrapa Bhagavan Mamapi Dudaim Vidishamya Janina Naraga Tinarapi Sunichana Tororapi Sahishna Manina Manadana Kirtanya Sarahari Nadanam Janam Sundarim Kavitam Vajagarishama Mamarishari Babatad Bhakti Rahaituki Twayi Nadanam Janam Sundarim Babatad Bhakti Rahaituki I nanda tanu jakin karampatitam mam vivshave kripayatava para pankachistata dalashavedisham vichintayam nayanam gadashvaya varanam gadgaduriragira pulukam nichitam pabu karandha tavanamagani visidi Yugayitam nimeshana chakshusa pravisayitam sanyayitam jagat sarvam govinda varahename asishava pararam parashtim mamadarshana mamahatam karotyo yatatata bhavididatana matpranadashtusha evanaparaha. All together now. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And why did Lord Chaitanya get such bliss? And why did he recommend so highly the chanting of the holy names? Because we are constitutionally Krishna conscious living beings. Constitutionally, we were created as parts of the Lord with the same qualities of the Lord, and it's our nature to love the Lord in great, intimate affection. And this is confirmed in all scriptures. There's no other higher purpose in the human form of life than awakening your love of God. Savai pum sam paro dharma. Dharma means duties, and we have many duties: family, friends, country. And these duties all pertain to this current conditional material body and to this lifetime. Next life, we may get a different body, and along with that body is a whole another set of duties. Those categories of duties are not constitutional, they're conditional. They're conditioned upon our body. And when you, even in one lifetime, you have a young body, you have so many duties to your parents and your teachers. Your body changes into manhood, then you have duties to your wife and your children and your boss. And then your body changes, and then you have duties to, I don't know, politicians or grandchildren. So even within one lifetime, we see so many changes of bodies, and even within one lifetime, with each major change of body, there's a change in the duties, which are conditional. But we don't change. The eternal spirit soul, part and parcel of God, remains the same throughout all the various changes of body from one life to another lifetime. So our connection as parts of God, as servants of God, is always the same. That's why we call it constitutional. So each and every one, wherever there's life, and whether it's a human life or any other life form, we are constitutionally parts and parcels of God. However, only in the human form of life can we come to that realization and act upon that understanding. Lest we make the mistake of thinking that God is spirit, I'm spirit, therefore I'm God, which is a pitfall that many people fall into in the first stages of transcendental inquiry and progress. Lest we think that we're God. The dimensions of the individual soul are mentioned. I believe it's in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Take a hair from your head, if you could divide into 100 parts. Then take that 1/100th part of the tip of the hair, and if you could divide that into 100 parts. What you have left is 1/10,000th the size of a tip of a hair. That is the length and breadth of the soul. It resides within the heart about halfway from the front, halfway from the back. Accompanying the individual finite soul is the Paramatma, the Supreme Soul, who is an expansion of the Lord through Karnadakshay, Vishagarbhadakshay, Sirabhakshay. We discussed that extensively a couple of weeks ago. So we are of the same stuff as God. God is Satchidananda, we're Satchidananda, but the difference between him and us is there's another word tacked onto the end. Then we refer to God, Satchidananda, at the end you put Vigraha. He is the full embodiment of knowledge, bliss, and eternity. We're a tiny soul, part of the internal energy of the Lord, but we're in this tabernacle, and our freedom is so limited. We're so conditioned. We're not meant for birth, death, disease, and old age, swollen lips, viruses, hunger, thirst, pimples. We're not meant for any of that stuff. Loneliness, frustration, depression, anxiety. We're eternal. What is this epidemic of suicide? When you're eternal, how can you even consider suiciding? So we're of the same nature as God. But that God is spirit and I'm spirit doesn't mean that I am the supreme spirit. I'm just 1/10,000th the size of a tip of a hair. That tiny particle of God illuminates this entire body with consciousness, from the top of the head to the tip of the toes. So powerful. It drives us throughout an entire lifetime, 60, 70, 100 years. And it is not that at the time of death the soul gets tired. Just the opposite. The soul has so much energy, it never stops. It goes through the body. It uses up the body. It consumes the body. The time of death, it is the body that can no longer keep up with the soul. See what I'm saying? So the soul discards the body and then gets a new, younger body to accommodate the high energy levels of the soul. But the unfortunate fact of the matter is that the soul will never be happy in a material body. The material body just slows it down, suffocates it, stifles it to such an extent that the soul is completely unhappy in this body. Give it a house, give it a car, give it fame, give it an unlimited bank account, give it a good spouse or a good boyfriend or girlfriend. That is not even a drop of pleasure. The soul hankers after an ocean of pleasure. The drops of pleasure in the form of wealth and worldly acclaim and bodily beauty will never satisfy the soul. It's like we're in an ocean. Exactly opposite. We're in a desert. And somebody comes to us in the desert, we're dying of thirst, and says, here's a drop, here's some fame. Another drop, here's some celebrity, another drop. Here's $1 million, another drop. Here's a beautiful wife, another drop. Here's a big house, another drop. These little drops, these little drips are not gonna satisfy us in the desert. You need an ocean of water, and that can only be supplied by our reconnecting as tiny infinitesimal souls to the infinite soul, the unlimitedly happy, pleasurable, and loving Lord who is full with wealth, strength, beauty, knowledge. And we don't have to strive for these qualities of wealth and fame and beauty separately. We just have to connect ourselves with Krishna. He's the source of all those qualities. Therefore, we go back to our original theme, that if you simply take the trouble to find out a bona fide representative of the Lord and understand from him in truth, tatpadaham, the transcendental nature of the appearance and activities of the Lord, you will, upon leaving this current body, never again take another material body or return into this material world. What to speak of the time of death? As soon as you engage in the service of the bona fide representative of the Lord, you're already immortal. You're already on the liberated platform, as confirmed by Krishna in the 14th chapter, 26th verse of the Bhagavad Gita. Do you know what it is, Prashant? You can anticipate it from, already by putting the link down before I even say. Give you a moment there, a beat. If anybody wants to add the link, it is now 8:02. So if you've added the link anytime before 8:02, you will have anticipated me. Bhaktisiddhanta has some disciples that were so expert in the scriptures, he would be talking and then he would ask one of his disciples, okay, what verse am I going to quote now? And he said, some of my disciples are so expert, they're there before I get there. So if you're there before I get there, go ahead and put that link in the comments. And now I'll give it to you, okay? Mam chayovi vacharina. Those who are engaged in my devotional service without interruption, without deviation, bhakti yogana sevate, in devotion, sagunam samititacham, they transcend, they rise above all the limitations of conditioned life in this material body and come Brahmabhuya kalpate. They come to the level of Brahman, of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. Brahman comes from the word Brahmana. I think my wife needs to turn her phone off. Bye, Bobby. Thank you. They come to the level of Brahman. And it is said throughout our Vaishnava scriptures that simply on the strength of becoming a devotee, sticking fast to the lotus feet of Krishna. Excuse me, I think I have to close the door here. There's too many disturbances. Sorry, interrupted the flow of our talk there. Satkana Nipuna Vipo Mantatanda Vishana Vaishnava Guru Shacha Vaishnava Shapacha Guru. Says, even if one is born in the family of a Brahmin, Mantatanda Vishana, he's conversant, he's glib. The verses, the mantras, and the tantras flow from his mouth like currents of water, but he's not a Vaishnava. He doesn't understand the nature of Krishna's birth and appearances in truth, not having learned it from a spiritual master. He thinks of Krishna as an ordinary personality, or he lumps him in amongst the demigods. Such a person is not actually qualified as a Brahmana. But even one who's born in a low family, or a family of low-class people, or even dog eaters, who understands the science of Krishna, he is to be accepted as a perfect Brahma. The only qualification is to follow the instructions of Krishna and to share them with others. The instructions of Krishna are perfect. They spring from the spiritual platform. Every embodied living being in this material world, including even the demigods like Lord Shiva and Brahma, because of their embodiment, are subject to 4 defects: illusion, cheating, imperfect senses, and there's a tendency to commit mistakes. All we have to do is follow the Lord diligently, repeat what the Lord and his representative have said, and realize those truths deep down in our soul by discussing them and churning them over in our minds with other devotees. Then one will be in the transcendental position. One will be liberated even in the here and now. Therefore, anybody who's a sincere devotee of Lord Krishna, moving forward, perfecting his or her own life, and spreading the good news to others, speaking only on the basis of Krishna's instructions, is understood to be virajam, or free from the defects of material contamination. Prabhupada used to say, all of my disciples are pure devotees, because if you're speaking what Krishna said, and you're avoiding the 4 pillars of sinful life, illicit sex, gambling, intoxication, meat eating, you are immortal. Should you ever get down off of that, then you're not immortal. But as long as you're serving in that mood and capacity, one is immortal. Now, Prabhupada said, the difference between me and my disciples is that they can fall down and I cannot. But anyone who's following strictly, even if they have shortcomings, even if they occasionally think of the bad habits they had before they became devotees, even if as devotees, as Arjuna was called upon to do during the Kurukshetra war, they do things in the service of the Lord which are criticized and censored by the public in general, still they can be considered saintly because they are rightly situated. So Prabhupada says, there are many people throughout the world that exhibit the opulences of Krishna, like wealth and fame and knowledge and beauty, who are surrounded with all the replete facilities of life. They're full of wealth, they're economic developed, they're beautiful, they feel themselves especially graced. And yet, these material acquisitions and accoutrements are no more satisfying than a drop of water to a thirsty man in the desert. It is not more pleasant, ladies and gentlemen, to be packed in the womb of a Rockefeller than it is in the womb of a McGillicuddy. It is not more pleasant to die with a big bank balance than it is to die with a small bank balance. All of our opulence and wealth and trappings cannot mitigate the miseries of birth, death, disease, and old age. It's not possible. I remember many years ago in the 80s, Prabhupada negotiated a great deal for the Fisher Mansion in Detroit. This was a house that had been built just after the turn of the century for about $3 million, which would have cost $30 million to build nowadays. And he was the founder of Cadillac Motors and also, I think, car bodies, chassis by Fisher. And so his house was right on the Detroit River. He had 2 boat docking docks, so his friends who were yachting on the Detroit River could just pull into his basement. There was a bowling alley in his basement. There was an entire ballroom upstairs. This building Prabhupada bought for $300,000 in the 80s because the area surrounding it had kind of deteriorated. But as we toured it, and before it had been converted to a temple, we went into a room which adjoined Mr. Fisher's bedroom. He was a bachelor. And they opened these cabinets. And the tour guide told us that Mr. Fisher had 400 negligees, so that whatever woman he was spending the night with could have her choice of 400 different negligees to wear. So what was I thinking at that time? And I'll never forget, I was thinking, man, it must have been really hard for this guy to die. But what did all of his wealth accomplish? It's just more painful having to leave it behind the time of death. He worked so hard for it. struggled, foamed at the mouths, conspired, schemed, maybe even went into ethical gray areas in order to get this building. And you don't usually get wealth like that until you're past the age that you can enjoy it. Your senses are usually on the wane by the time you come into that kind of opulence. That's the first element of frustration. And the second consideration is that how painful it must have been at the time of death to leave that, to be ripped away from all that opulence and sensual stimulation. Take the example of a Band-Aid. I have probably, I don't know, I guess my forearm is just about as hairy as any other man's, not more so or less so. It's pretty average, and I'm sure you've had with me the experience of having a small Band-Aid on a cut on your forearm. When it comes time to remove that Band-Aid, the smaller the Band-Aid is and the fewer hairs it's attached to, it's still painful, but it's less painful than if you have a big Band-Aid that's attached to millions and millions of hairs and you have to rip that off. That's much, much more painful because it's adhering to so many more follicles of hair. So some of the more attachments that you have, the more painful and traumatic and agonizing it is to die. Then if you have left your last body in a state of extreme pain, frustration, disappointment, disorientation, and even anger, then your next birth is not going to be nearly as good. In this way, we get entangled in the complexity of material nature and we dig ourselves deeper and deeper and deeper into the pit. I heard about an English visitor who came to America, and he heard about he had a friend, and his friend lived in a suburban house with a pool and a modern kitchen with all the gadgets and gadgetries and a beautiful entrance to the door and a doorbell that rang Beethoven, everything. And inside, in the bedroom, the lady of the house was reading a book, How to Become Happy. That's a scenario. That's a glimpse of our life in America. Here's a question for you. If you're familiar with the Bhagavad Gita and Arjuna's consternation at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, what does Arjuna say? Nahi prabhasami mamapadyudyadyak shokam ushoshami avapi bhamoshabhatmanim rajam saramari charipatnam. Arjuna has only to fight and defeat the Kauravas, and then he'll enjoy an unrivaled kingdom on earth. He and his brothers will be the undisputed rulers of the earth. The thorns in their sides, who have been Duryodhana and his cronies, will have been removed. And so there's only one more obstacle to get rid of, and then Arjuna will be literally emperor of the world along with his brothers. And yet, what is his mood in anticipation and envisioning that? He says, Naha prapashimima, I cannot drive away the grief. You'd think he'd be happy if material acquisition was what would give us happiness. Arjuna would, if that was the case, Arjuna would be like vibrating. I just have to defeat these, and then I'll have achieved everything there is achieved. I'll be completely happy with women and wives and opulence and servants and no rivals. But just the opposite. Arjuna is, I cannot find any means to drive away the grief which is drying up my senses. So why would Arjuna react in that way at the imminent prospect of enjoying life on the level of the demigods? His reaction to that was to recoil from that aspiration and from the acts and motives that he would have had to have bought into in order to achieve that. And instead, he took refuge in Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada says that is the right path for peace and harmony. The results of pious activities are temporary. You can go and improve your standard of living, even up to the demigods. But once the stock of your pious activities have exhausted themselves, you fall down again to this material world. Many opulent, rich, celebrated people and politicians and entrepreneurs have reached that pinnacle of material success only to be dragged down again and to be toppled. Better to spend and invest the valuable time and energy in this human form of life to understand the transcendental nature of the birth and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, and following the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, ecstatically chant, dance, spread the love of Krishna consciousness, and then at the time of leaving this current material body, never again come back to birth, death, disease, and old age in this world of birth, death, disease, and old age, but rather revive one's original Krishna consciousness and go back to home, back to Godhead, taking as many other fallen souls with you as possible. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thomas, thank you so much. Jimmy, thank you. Joe, Yudha, Govinda Dev, appreciate you all. Manasa Ganga, Sundari Priya, Rakesh, Haribo, Prashant, Bhavi, doing laundry and playing back my own talk to me out there in the hallway. We're going to have a talk after this. Jean, Radhe Sham, Pavana, Rajdeep, thanks for joining us. Anjali, tell us about your singing career, I'm curious. Rap time, go, go, go. Yes, the Vigraha. Michael sends me some of his mouth-watering recipes from time to time again. He loves to cook prasadam. Jai Krishna Das, good morning. Good morning. I follow you on Instagram, your yoga classes, your activities in the park, much appreciated. All right, thank you so much. This will be the last broadcast for this particular week, but we'll be back next week with more stories and hopefully more inspirational insights into the Srimad Bhagavatam, the beautiful story of the absolute truth, understanding the truth of which we finish up our sojourn in this material world and go back to home, back to Godhead. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.